As these men were fishing, an unexpected creature suddenly appeared from the tall grass. Fishermen usually search for fish, so it surprised these three fishermen a lot when a creature suddenly hopped out of the tall grass and came right at them. But what was this creature, and what did it want? On a sunny spring Sunday, a group of friends gathered on a small road in Utah. They parked their pickup trucks one by one and got out. The three men, James, Brian, and Andrew, were old friends from high school who still lived in their hometown. They greeted each other warmly with big hugs, unloaded their trucks, and began walking towards the creek nearby. Fishing by the creek had become a regular thing for them. It was a nice way to hang out, relax, and catch some fish for dinner. But they had no idea what would happen that day. The creek wasn't too far from a road with lots of cars. You could hear the traffic noise in the background, but it didn't bother them much. They had been coming to this spot since long before the road was even there, and they didn't want to leave because they had a strong attachment to it. As they set up their chairs and fishing gear, they laughed and talked about old times. Their kids were all grown up now and had moved to different places. They used to be like one big family, but things had changed over the years. James used to have a dog called Lily who he would bring fishing with the group from time to time. Sadly, she passed away a few months ago, and he missed her at times like these. He got news from his kids every now and then, so he knew they were all right, but Lily was gone forever. To make things worse, James' wife had lost her battle to cancer earlier in the year, and Lily had been by her side the entire time. These fishing trips helped him with the loneliness. He was too old to make new friends, and Brian and Andrew were some of the only people he could talk with, so they made the most of the time they had together. They laughed about how Lily would swim in the creek and try to catch a fish in her own way. Usually they would blame her when they couldn't catch anything. She would jump around in the water and scare off any chance of success. "Egg, we're working here," James would say to Lily to try and get her to behave, but it was no use. She loved swimming too much. This time, though, there was no dog to disturb the creek, so they had no excuse for not catching anything. James opened a big cooler that his wife had once bought him for his birthday. Inside, he had bait, drinks, and supplies. Then they all sat down with their fishing rods in hand and began the day. But as time went by, there was still nothing biting. They didn't mind much. They were just enjoying being in each other's company. Just when they were starting to drift off, something unexpected happened. One of the men gasped in shock. He saw the traffic on the highway was swerving all over the place, and two semi-trailers almost collided. Something was crossing the road, but it was too far away to tell what it was. There was honking of horns, and they could hear people yelling out of their windows in the distance. Then there was a rustling in the bushes ahead, much closer to their fishing spot. Whatever had crossed the road was heading their way and fast. The three men sat there silently, exchanging glances before looking back toward the bushes. They had no idea what it could be. As the bushes swayed faster and faster, they heard a noise getting closer too. It was a small, high-pitched noise, but it could have been coming from a wild animal. "What is that?" yelled Andrew, moving back slowly in his chair. Judging by the way the traffic moved, it must have been something big. There were known to be bears wandering the area on the other side of the highway up near the forest. That was part of the reason they felt more comfortable at this spot. But it looked like a bear might have made its way out of the forest to the creek. The fishermen were almost out of their seats and ready to run. They had all been camping before and knew they didn't stand a chance against a wild, hungry bear. Just then, something came galloping out from the greenery and onto the damp creek bed. But it wasn't a bear. It wasn't even a big animal. It was tiny. It had a bushy tail, gray fur, soft paws, and very big eyes. Once it broke out of the tall grass, it slowed to a standstill. When it tipped it up to their fishing spot, they could see that it was just a little kitten. The men all let out a sigh of relief. "My God, I was really scared there for a minute," breathed Andrew as he picked up his beer and leaned back again. The kitten had somehow made it all the way across the road to the creek. There was no collar on her, and her hair was a little scruffy. She crept up to their campsite, pinched a piece of fish bait with her teeth, and scurried back a few yards, keeping her eyes fixed on the men. After gobbling down the bait, she disappeared into the water. It was only shallow, but then again, she was really small. The three men moved to the edge of their chairs and peered into the water, worried that she might not come back up. That's when she appeared again in a flash, sending water spraying everywhere. When the fishermen wiped their faces clean, the little kitten had a fish in its mouth. "Well, look at that!" yelled James. He couldn't believe it. She had caught a fish so easily while they had been trying all day. "She's a fisherman's friend," that one, said Brian, while he chuckled to himself. The kitten came running back to play with her new friends. She went straight to James's stuff and jumped into his cooler box with the fish. "Now what do you think you're doing?" James asked with a grin. He had never been a cat person, but this one was slowly winning him over. After all, it looked like she had just gifted him a fish. She stayed in the box, and the men eventually went back to their fishing. They chatted for hours, and by the time they were ready to pack up and leave, they had almost forgotten all about her. As James reeled his fishing rod in and packed it back into its case, he remembered the kitten was still in his cooler. With a big sigh, James picked up the cooler and gave in. "Looks like this one is my catch of the day," James said to his friends, who couldn't help but smile at the thought of him having a new companion. They knew that he had been lonely but didn't know how to help. They said their goodbyes and wished each other well, but James was the last to leave. As he was packing up his trunk, he was met with one last surprise. Another little gray kitten was waiting by his tire. When she was reunited with the first one, they played and cuddled in the cooler together. "Oh, this must be your sister," said James to himself. It was clear that this was a package deal, and he just didn't have the heart to say no. He brought the two kittens to his home, gave them baths, and made sure they were clean. After drying their little heads with his towel, both kittens snuggled up to him and were grateful for their new parent. James posted flyers all around town to see if anyone had lost them, but no one responded. A week later, he decided to take them to the vet. He used to visit Dr. Adam for his other pet, Lily, but when he got there, he learned that Dr. Adam had retired and his daughter, Maria, was now the head vet. "Who are these adorable little cats?" Maria asked when she met James's two orphans. James hadn't really thought about it, but he decided to name them Angler and Fisher because they seemed to love fishing. Maria and James talked for almost an hour until people in the waiting room started getting impatient. They decided to continue their conversation over dinner the following week. So, even though the fishermen didn't catch any fish that day, it marked the beginning of a new family for James. From then on, he always took Angler and Fisher with him whenever he went fishing. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.
Thanks for watching another heartwarming video. Please check out our channel for more stories that will make your heart melt.